Today's session is about political corruption during the Gilded Age. Our essential question is how and why did politics change during the Gilded Age? So we talked about urbanization. Cities were growing very rapidly, and the city governments were having trouble keeping up with the problems that were created by urbanization. Because of this, we begin to see the rise of political machines in America's largest cities. A political machine controlled politics and city governments to ensure two things. First of all, that their candidates are elected, and second of all, that government works to their advantage. Usually, political machines were headed by the boss. That was usually the mayor of city government, but it could also be another official within the political machine. So political machines depended on voter loyalty. In order to make sure that they stayed in power, they went out of their way to ensure enough votes to maintain that power. Some of the ways they did this was by targeting the poor and the new immigrants to the city and provided them services in exchange for their votes. So they would do things like help them get a job, lend them rent money if they needed it, provide food, run soup kitchens, help them in the process of becoming citizens. So these are all, good things, right, that they are helping people out with. However, in exchange for these services, they demanded your vote. And at the end of the day, while they maintained power, political machines were stealing taxpayer money. So at the end of the day, they are robbing from everyone, but doing these services up front in order to maintain that voter loyalty. They also participated in election fraud to make sure that they stayed in power. They would get people to vote multiple times under different names. They would put their people in charge of counting the ballots and skewing the numbers. Lots of illegal activities to make sure that they continued to win. Bribes were common between businesses and the government. Construction contracts would be awarded to construction companies that were in cahoots with the city government, and they would enrich themselves using taxpayer money. We'll look at an example of that in a couple of minutes. So the most iconic political machine boss was William Boss Tweed, who was the head of the political machine in New York City. The political machine was also known as Tammany Hall. Tammany Hall was the name of the physical Democratic headquarters in New York. But the name of the building became synonymous with the corrupt politics that dominated the city government. So he ruled for 12 years at the head of his Tweed Ring, organizing the political machine of New York City. He was eventually convicted of stealing millions of dollars from taxpayers and eventually died in jail. However, I'll tell you a story about that in a few minutes. Okay, here's what I was talking about, the example of construction contracts and stealing taxpayer money. So this happened in New York, building a county courthouse. The final cost was $13 million, which would be $178 million in today's money, and 20 years to complete. So they awarded a carpenter $5 million in today's money for 1 month of labor in a building where there was very little wood. They gave a furniture contractor $2.5 million in today's money for 3 tables and 40 chairs. A plasterer got $1.8 million in today's money for 2 days of work. So they are basically just funneling this money into um, business owners, usually, and they're getting a kickback as well. So whenever a committee investigated why it took so long to build the courthouse, it spent $100,000 to print its report. That printing company was owned by Boss Tweed. Um, so in every way, these guys were corrupt and stealing from taxpayers, right? This was taxpayer money that was being used and being wasted and being stolen. Thomas Nast was a political cartoonist for Harper's Weekly. Many of the cartoons that we look at in this class were drawn by Thomas Nast. He attacked Tammany Hall, and he is credited with the downfall of Boss Tweed. He helped popularize the symbols of the Democratic donkey, the Republican elephant, and Uncle Sam through his cartoons. So there is a series of his cartoons included in this slideshow. You have the notes. I'm not going to go over all of them in this recording. So the funny story I was going to tell you about Boss Tweed. So he was sent to jail originally, but he was able to break out, right? If you are the most powerful man in New York City, you're going to find a way to escape. He went all the way across the ocean to Europe. He was in Spain. Whenever he was recognized by someone who had seen Thomas Nast political cartoons. So he was caught and sent back to jail where he stayed until he died because of the political cartoons drawn by Nast. This is what Boss Tweed said about Thomas Nast. "Stop them damned pictures. I don't care what the papers write about me. My constituents can't read, but they can't help seeing them damned pictures." Right? So he was exposing the corruption of Boss Tweed through his political cartoons. And his cartoons were so important because even people who were illiterate could discern the meaning from those political cartoons. Political corruption was also rampant at the national level. Presidencies during the Gilded Age are noted for being either incredibly corrupt or just plain out forgettable because the presidents were weak and did not do much. The people who had the power during the Gilded Age would be the political machine bosses, as well as our wealthy businessmen like Rockefeller and Carnegie. National politics were dominated by the spoils system. You should recall talking about the creation of the spoils system during Andrew Jackson's presidency. Maybe you looked at this cartoon in your American History 1 class. The spoils system is awarding jobs to loyal party members, even if they are not qualified for that job. So this led to corruption throughout the government, as well as inefficient government, because you have a lot of people doing jobs that they're not qualified to do. We had tried to reform the spoils system, and we had not had much success. It's going to take something dramatic in order to change this corrupt system. That dramatic event was the assassination of President James Garfield. He was assassinated by a man named Charles Guiteau, who was angry about not receiving a government job. He considered himself a loyal party member. He had some illusions of grandeur. He thought that he was incredibly important when, in fact, he was not well known at all. But he ended up shooting and killing the president because he did not receive a government job that he thought he was entitled to. So this led to the signing of the Pendleton Civil Service Act in 1883. Um, this act established a commission that wrote an exam that you had to pass in order to receive a government job. So no more, handing out positions to people who aren't qualified just because they give you money or are loyal members of your political party. Getting a government job would be based on merit, not just who you know. So the spoil system was ended by the Pendleton Civil Service Act, which was the direct result of the assassination of the president. Other Gilded Age presidents were Chester A. Arthur. He was Garfield's vice president. He assumes he is the one who signs the Pendleton Civil Service Act. However, he got his start as a politician as part of the New York political machine. So, the corrupt system that got him into power, he helps destroy by signing the Pendleton Act. Grover Cleveland, we remember him as the only president to serve non-consecutive terms. He was the 22nd and the 24th president. He was recognized for his integrity during this period of extreme corruption. And then finally, Benjamin Harrison, who most people have never heard of because he was a president who did not do much. He did not use his power as president to really accomplish anything. He was the grandson, though, of William Henry Harrison, who you may remember died after a month in office after giving a super long inaugural address on a cold, rainy day. So, in summary, the Gilded Age was dominated by corrupt politics at every level: city, state, national. This political cartoon called The Bosses of the Senate is actually my favorite political cartoon. Um, and it demonstrates who had the power within Congress. And those people who had the power were the trust, right? These wealthy businessmen who use their money to gain influence in our national politics. These are our senators who are being dominated by these men. Over here, you see the people's entrance, and it is closed and locked, right? So the people do not have a place in the Senate. It says, this is a Senate of the monopolist, by the monopolist, and for the monopolist. So this cartoon demonstrates the corruptness of our national government and the influence of money over politics, a issue that we are still dealing with today.